grief, depression, coping with the loss of a loved one. These are just some of the potent themes present in the 1983 novel Pet Sematary, written by world-renowned author Stephen King. Pet Sematary has been recognized as one of King's finest works, fearlessly tackling the subjects of death and family trauma. I myself have become an enormous Stephen King fan, so of course I devoured the novel upon purchase. I became utterly caught up in this dramatic tale of a family that completely falls apart at the seams once a tragic death enters their lives. Since its initial release, Hollywood has adapted the book twice for the big screen. In 1989, director Mary Lambert took a crack at King's opus. The result? In my opinion, the movie could have been better.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
I find the 89 film to be an average, slightly goofy flick featuring an incredibly stiff performance from lead actor Dale Midkiff. But the movie followed the book well enough. Then, in 2017, Paramount announced a remake was in the works. The remake, starring Jason Clarke as the father Louis Creed, was finally released to the public in 2019. My thoughts? Well, there are some things I thought the 2019 film did much better than the 89 film. Right off the bat, I must mention Jason Clarke. He brings much depth and emotional gravitas to the character of Louis. And in later scenes, when he's grieving over the loss of a family member, he is absolutely mesmerizing. I completely bought him as a man who gradually loses a grip on his sanity. It's a heartbreaking performance. But, as I'm sure audiences are aware of by now, there is one enormous difference that the filmmakers incorporated into the 2019 remake. You all know it. In the original book and 1989 film, it's the youngest son, Gage, who dies. In the remake, it's the daughter, Ellie. This change was the subject of some major, and I mean major, controversy. Book purists were up in arms, claiming the filmmakers had ruined the overall message of the story. But is it possible that this change was actually for the better? Well, I might get some flack for this, but I found the third act of the remake to be much more narratively appropriate. Why, you may ask? First, a brief recap of the general plot of Pet Sematary. I know many of you are already aware of the plot, but going through it again may shed some light on why the 2019 film's ending works better overall. The book and two movies follow a young doctor from Chicago and his picture-perfect family as they move to a countryside house in Maine. Louis Creed, his wife Rachel, and their kids Ellie and Gage are all very likable protagonists, especially the young Ellie, a curious child who is just starting to learn about death. This part of the story is incredibly relatable to parents everywhere. Talking with your children about a topic as heavy as death is no easy task. After all, it feels like you're stripping away some of their innocence. But Louis welcomes the idea of instructing his daughter about death. However, his wife, who had an incredibly traumatic experience with death at a young age, is against it. Eventually, they are introduced by their kind elderly neighbor Judd to the Pet Sematary, a place where local kids bury their deceased animal friends. When the family cat Church passes away unexpectedly, Judd decides to escort Louis to a haunted Micmac burial ground that can supposedly bring dead things back to life. He does this in an effort to spare young Ellie's pain of seeing her beloved cat dead. The cat is buried and comes back to life as an aggressive walking corpse. But, despite the change, Louis is thankful that his daughter will never have to endure the pain of losing her pet. But soon after, an unspeakable tragedy occurs. As stated, the book and 89 film feature the death of their youngest son, Gage. This tears the entire family apart. Rachel, devastated at the death of her son, turns into an emotionless zombie. In the book, Louis is also blamed by his father-in-law for Gage's death. Well, the stress becomes too much, and Louis decides to bury his dead son at the Micmac burial ground in hopes of resurrecting him. Gage comes back as a murderous monster, butchering Judd with a scalpel and eating his own mother alive. Louis, realizing that this is not his son, kills it. But he fails to learn his lesson and buries his dead wife, hoping she will come back to life normally. The final sentence of the book has some exceedingly terrifying implications. While the death of Cage does tie into the book's main theme of not being able to let a loved one go, it does betray a subplot established earlier. Ellie, not Gage, is the one who is educated about death and all it entails. Like any child, she becomes very fearful of the concept and dreads at the fact that she too will one day die. This part of the book is very sad and heart-wrenching, as we as readers witness this innocent child become more and more weary of the dangerous world outside her window. But, in a bizarre turn of events, Ellie is left on the sidelines during the final few chapters in the book. We never get to discover her reaction to the horrible deaths of her family members. She just kind of disappears, out of the story, just like that. The 2019 film retcons this by having her be the one to die halfway through. Not only is this an absolute gut punch, it adds to the overall horror of the situation. Watching a child so terrified of death come face to face with her worst fear is beyond emotionally devastating. And seeing her come back as this evil entity is even more horrifying to witness. Killing off the youngest child is indeed a bold move, but it felt like King was abandoning several plot points he had introduced earlier. And, let's be honest, on paper, a dead 3-year-old could come across as creepy. On film though, it just looks silly. In addition, I found the third act of the 2019 film to be much more intense than both the book and 89 film. Part of that has to do with the astounding child performance by Jete Lawrence, who delivers a spine-tingling performance as this homicidal corpse. The climax in the 2019 film also takes things one step further by showing Lewis's death on screen. So at the end, we have a dead Lewis, a dead Rachel, and a dead Ellie, all ganging up on a still alive Gage, who at this point in the film is left alone and helpless, simply unnerving. The filmmakers behind the 2019 film knew the substantial risk they were taking by changing this story element. But King himself has even welcomed it. As an author, he has openly admitted things he wishes he could change in several of his books. Ending aside, did people really want to see just another rehash of the same story? The point of a remake is to take the initial concept of a story and twist things around in a whole unique way. The 2019 Pet Sematary did that in spades, while remaining true to the overall spirit of the book, and for these reasons, I find it to be an improvement in many areas. Thank you so much for joining me in my discussion. Do you think the ending of the 2019 Pet Sematary was an improvement or a mistake? Either way, I would love to hear your opinions. If you like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel Round the Clock Frights for more horrific content. Have a scary day, boils and ghouls.
Sometimes, Dad is better.